my name's Liz O'Neill. I'm the director of an organisation called GM Freeze. We are an umbrella campaign. We've got members including the Soil Association, Friends of the Earth, scientists, farmers, lots of individuals. We've got retailers. You know, we're a very mixed bunch, so they employ me to represent them. And the reason that we exist, the reason that all those organisations come together under our umbrella is because we want all of our food to be produced responsibly, fairly and sustainably. And we campaign for a moratorium on GM food and farming in the UK because what we see of GM is not that. Do you know, we're not anti-GM for its own sake. We want something sustainable, fair and responsible, and that's not what we're seeing with GM. So that's our starting position. My own journey to end up here today is possibly a little different from many people's. My first experience of GM was actually studying recombinant DNA technology, as we called it then, and as I think some people call it now. When I was, well, it's a very long time ago, it was in the 1980s when I was at university doing a biochemistry degree. And, you know, like most teenagers, I was very idealistic, and I thought that this was going to be something wonderful that would do great things in the world. And, you know, unfortunately none of that has happened. GM isn't being used to feed the poor. It isn't being used to save us from climate change. In fact, 80% of GM crops are herbicide tolerant. Do you know, that means that they've had their DNA changed so that they tolerate being heavily sprayed with very powerful weed killers. And the vast majority of that is glyphosate. You probably hear quite a lot about glyphosate today, and you know, so it's a bit dull in a way talking about one pesticide, but you know, this is the reality of what GM is. The vast majority of GM is food that, whilst growing, is very heavily sprayed with glyphosate. And glyphosate was recently classified as a probable human carcinogen by the WHO. Now, that probable word, sounds as if it's all negotiable. That's about as strong as they get. Do you know, this is the kind of organisation that I can't remember the number of decades, but it took many decades for them to classify tobacco as a carcinogen. So, you know, the probable human carcinogen is pretty bad. And the thing is that glyphosate isn't just bad for us, it's devastating to wildlife. In the UK, we had the farm-scale evaluations. They were field-scale trials in the 1990s and early 2000s, and they showed that herbicide-tolerant GM crops are bad for butterflies, they're bad for bees, they're bad for all sorts of wildlife. And you know, we don't need to rely on those tests. We've had GM growing in North and South America for 20 years, and the monarch butterfly, which is an amazing creature, it's a butterfly that migrates across 2 continents over, I think, 3 generations. It's just crazy, and it's, you know, absolutely adored in those countries. It's declined by 90%. And now 2 peer-reviewed studies have laid the blame firmly at GM farming techniques. So that's what the reality of GM is. It's not, you know, this wonderful vision for the future. GM is also bad for farmers. Haley Law talked, to some extent, and I'm sure there are going to be other speakers who will talk about the way that GM hands control of food production over to huge corporations. Now, that's not something that's to do with, you know, the molecular techniques of GM. It's to do with the reality of the world in which GM operates. The fact that it hands over, you know, patent controls in a different way than other farming. So it's all about what GM ends up doing, you know, as well as what's happening at that DNA level. But, you know, at a field level, GM's causing all sorts of problems as well. More than half of US farmers have Roundup resistant weeds on their farms. And, you know, you only have to know the most basic facts about evolution to realise that, of course, that's what's going to happen. If you spray the same weed killer all over your fields again and then again, then, you know, evolution steps in. Nature's very good at dealing with this sort of situation, and you will have glyphosate-resistant weeds all over your farms. That's happening. It's happened so much, but the GM companies have an answer. And that answer is to create GM crops that are resistant to several pesticides. So now you can spray a cocktail all over your fields. And again, you don't need a degree in agrochemistry to know what will happen. If we just keep upping the ante in the chemical warfare on nature, the chemical warfare on our food, then there's only one way that can end, and it's not going to end well for us.